Hi again then guys, and welcome to another specific look back to the relatively recent time of Gran Turismo 6 to specifically look at one car. And this particular vehicle is one which falls into an interesting category, and it's one which not many cars in the game do, and that is that it is technically a rally car, but at the same time it's not your traditional type of rally car, because of course this vehicle, the Lexus ISF CCS-R rally car, is a Pikes Peak rally car. But of course the Pikes Peak gradually over the years became more and more tarmac than it was dirt, to the point where now the entire hill climb is completely paved. So, although it is a rally, a tarmac rally, literally, just like certain rally stages in France or Britain are, this is not a traditional idea of the kind of rally car that you'd usually get in the game. When you think of rally cars in Gran Turismo, you think of stuff like WRC machines, the Escudo, perhaps for older players stuff like the Daihatsu Storia, and of course the Suzuki Cultus, which is one of my personal favourites from back in the day. You don't think of a rear-wheel drive super saloon like this one. And yet at the same time, it's a very interesting alternative to pretty much any of the other rally cars in the game. Now, not all of the others are all-wheel drive. There are some exceptions to that rule. The Nissan 240 RS and the Lancia Stratos are also rear-wheel drive rally cars, but the difference is they can still go on the dirt. Whereas, funnily enough, and ironically enough, this one actually can't. You cannot take this onto the dirt or snow as a traditional rally machine. So that poses an interesting question, really, about this car, which of course was a DLC vehicle, if you will, a free update that was added to the game. And that question is, what would you use this car for? Because it could very easily fall into a similar category to stuff like the Time Attack Subaru, which was relatively recently added to Gran Turismo Sport. A car which is pretty cool on its own, but doesn't necessarily have a ton of use when you take it up against other cars, either because of its class or because of the limitations of its tuning, in this case for instance, not being able to actually take it off-road. Well, the thing to bear in mind about this car is that it's a rally car only in name, as far as the game goes, because in real life it makes total sense. It's designed for one event and it performs in that event exactly as they want it to. In a game, we don't have the Pikes Peak Tarmac Rally. In fact, we don't have any form of Pikes Peak in Gran Turismo anymore, at least for the moment. And certainly not in Gran Turismo 6. So with that in mind, yes, it is technically a rally car, but the reality is, if you want to use this, you're much more inclined, really justifiably so, to take it up against touring cars and GT machines. And the great thing about Lexus is that there are a number of different Lexus models for that kind of racing. So the car actually isn't as alone as the Time Attack Subaru is on GT Sport. This is a car which is certainly unique, but it's similar enough to a number of other vehicles to still justifiably go up against them. For instance, you could take this up against the Lexus ISF touring car, you could take it up against some of the lower WED Sport GT300 cars if you felt so inclined, and even others too, other touring cars, DTM cars, GT3 cars, for instance, if you wanted to take it that far. In fact, it's actually lighter than some of those vehicles. Now, I'm not going to guarantee that it can beat them all, but of course that's part of the point of the review, to discuss what kind of potential it has. And of course, back on Gran Turismo 6, I always discuss what the car looks like in its fully tuned form, to give you some idea of what it can do when you buy it and spend a ton of cash on it. Whereas on other Gran Turismo games that doesn't always apply, for instance on Gran Turismo Sport. So in the case of this car, you're looking at a 5-litre engine, a V8 just like the road car. As I said, it is still rear-wheel drive. The weight though is a lot lower. When fully tuned, you're looking at 1,218 kilos, which is very good for a sports saloon, stripped out or otherwise, and it's putting out a lot of power, a whole lot of power in fact, 758 horsepower, 578 pound-feet of torque, which is pretty good, and even the PP level in its fully tuned form is actually not ridiculously high. It's over 600, but it's only just over, at 603. So the horsepower per tonne is 622, which again is easily supercar level, and actually better than some other rally cars in the game. And with a price tag of 120 grand, that's quite a good deal. It's actually a lot cheaper than many of the other traditional rally cars. In fact, it's cheaper than most of them. So you're getting a car which costs basically the same amount as some of the fictional rally cars and fictional touring cars from companies like Lexus, Subaru, Mitsubishi, whatever the case may be. But at the same time, you're getting a car which has the interesting oddball factor of technically being a rally car, which is a good conversation starter, and at the same time is very, very well designed and very adept at taking on technical, twisty tarmac circuits. Because at the end of the day, that's what it's designed for. So if you take a car like this onto the right track, it can actually be very good. Something like the Nordschleife or Sierra, for instance, those tracks do have at least a resemblance to portions of the Pikes Peak in terms of how twisty they are. So, although for me personally, the CCS-R was never a car which I used a ton on the game, mainly because it just didn't really appeal to me, it's certainly a vehicle that is worth a look. Now, I'm not sure how the download content goes now that the servers have been shut off, as to whether or not you can still get it. I assume that if you don't already have it, you can't get it anymore. That's what I would assume, as I said. But for those of us who do already have it, it is still in the game, of course. Now, in the grand scheme of things, it's one of the more oddball choices to add to the game, and yet, something about this car, and I guess part of it is the fact that it was added more recently to the franchise, does make me think, I have this nagging feeling, that this one could actually come back. It wouldn't surprise me if this car made a return to the Gran Turismo franchise, maybe even in Gran Turismo Sport. It probably would be a car that would end up in Group X, because of how strangely unique it is, but in the world of GT6 it has a number of uses, more so online, which unfortunately isn't an option anymore, but even in career mode there are certain circumstances where you could use this car. And the biggest advantage that it has is that it keeps all of the core values and abilities of the road car, which is itself already an excellent super saloon, but it builds on that by being even lighter, with more downforce, more grip, and it's more technically focused as a performance vehicle and as, more specifically, a competition vehicle. So it's certainly worth a look, one of the most interesting additions to the game in quite some time, but one which is a little bit more understated than a number of the other Pikes Peak cars that we've had, like the Tajima, the Cultus, the Escudo, etc. But certainly worth a look, and for a decent enough price. So that's it for this pick overall. Of course, I'll see you guys next time, and for now, as always, thanks for watching.